Assalamu alaikum dear students. This is a video lecture and today's topic is verbs. The topic verbs has been taken from your book English Ahead 3. It has been taken from chapter 4, that's entertainment. So let's discuss SLOs briefly. By the end of this lecture, the students will be able to differentiate between action verbs and primary auxiliary verbs. They will be able to use primary auxiliary verbs in their speech and writing. So before discussing primary auxiliary verbs, let's discuss verbs, the definition of verbs basically, right? So verbs are basically parts of speech and they are used to express or indicate the actions done by noun or pronoun or the subject in a sentence. They also describe processes being taken out. They also represent the conditions or states of beings of people or things. So let's now coming towards our topic, that is primary auxiliary verbs. Primary auxiliary verbs are also known as helping verbs because they are used to make perfect sentences, continuous sentences, negative sentences and interrogative sentences. As you can see in the table, examples have been given of primary auxiliary verbs being used to make perfect or continuous sentences, right? In the very first of the table, continuous sentences have been made by the help of primary auxiliary verbs. The primary auxiliary verbs am and was and are and were are used to make continuous sentences in the very first three sentences in the table. In the second uh, part of the table, you can see that perfect sentences have been made by the help of have, had or has had as primary auxiliary verbs. For example, I have eaten a mango. So in this sentence, have is primary auxiliary verb and it has been used to make a perfect sentence. Similarly, had is also a primary auxiliary verb and it has been used to make past perfect sentence, right? In the third examples of primary auxiliary verbs, you can see do, did, does and did have been given, and these primary auxiliary verbs have been used in these sentences to make negative questions, to make negative sentences, sorry, and to make interrogative sentences. So this is the function of primary auxiliary verbs and it has been categorized into primary auxiliary verbs on the basis of the function they perform in the sentence, right? So you can also see in this slide, primary auxiliary verbs are helping verbs and I have mentioned primary auxiliary verbs be, have and do, and they link the subject to an adjective or a noun, right? So the function of the primary auxiliary verbs is to link the subject to an adjective or a noun. For example, if you see in the very first sentence, I'm writing a story. This is a continuous sentence, but in the second sentence, he is a very genius student. If you see in this sentence, is a primary auxiliary verb and genius is an adjective. So in this sentence, the primary auxiliary verb is has linked the subject to the adjective in the sentence, right? So let's move towards linking verbs. So now there is a confusion among students regarding linking verbs or primary auxiliary verbs. There is a difference between linking verbs and primary auxiliary verbs, right? Linking verbs are basically verbs which are not action verbs, but however some verbs function as linking verbs as well as action verbs. Now here's the point that it depends on the function of the verb, that how that particular verb is performing the function in the sentence. Sometimes the verb is functioning as linking verb. It links the sentence, it links the subject to the adjective or to the noun in the sentence, and sometimes the same verb is performing the action. So it depends on the function of the verb. I will explain through the examples. As you can see, he appears to be poor. Now in this sentence, poor is an adjective, appears is a verb, but in this sentence the verb appears is connecting the subject he and the poor. So that's why in this sentence it is a linking verb, right? Because it is linking the subject to the adjective of the sentence. But in the second sentence, if you can see, he appeared before me. In this sentence, appear is an action verb, right? So here in this sentence it is performing the role of a action verb. State verbs, and as we discussed earlier that verbs are words which also describe the state of something. They express the state of a noun or a pronoun rather than an action. They do not show and they do not describe the action done by a noun or done by a pronoun, but they describe the state of something, right? So let's discuss the very first type of state verbs, and that is state verbs of emotions. So the first category of state verbs is state verbs of emotions. As the name indicates that it is about the emotions. The verb expresses the emotions of a noun or a pronoun, or of a subject. For example, love, like, adore, and desire. These are the words which describe the emotions or the feelings of a noun. They're not action verbs, they're not showing any kind of action, rather than they show and they express the emotions of a noun. So that's why they have been categorized into state verbs of emotions. And the second category is state verbs of possession, and some examples have been taken from your book, which are contain, consist, have, and include. These are verbs basically, but they're not showing any kind of action, right? For example, contain. The bottle contain 2 liters of water. Now in this sentence, contain is not action verb. It is not something in which there is an action, right? For example, the bottle cannot perform any kind of action, right? But it is showing the possession of that bottle. So that's why it is categorized into state verbs of possession. Similarly, the school consists of 5,000 students, for example, right? So in this sentence, the school is not performing any kind of action, but it is showing the possession of something, and that is the students. So that's why these words are state verbs of possession. I have an umbrella. In this sentence, I'm not performing any kind of action, but I'm showing the possession of something by using the verb have. So that's why it is categorized into state verbs of possession, and have is also used as a primary auxiliary verb. So now you can see that how the categorization of verbs is changed according to the function of the verb they perform. So you have to keep one thing in your mind, that one verb or one thing can have multiple functions, right? So it depends how the word has been used in the particular sentence. So the third category of state verbs is state verbs of mental states. Now you can see that mental states is referring to your mind, right? So these are the verbs which are related to your mental processes, and they are not related to your physical processes or the physical actions which are done by you or which are done by a noun. For example, believe. Now, believe is a verb, but there is not any kind of action when you believe something. It is something that is related to your mind, something that is going on in your mind, right? So it is not about an action or a physical activity, rather than it is a mental process. So that's why these kind of verbs, for example, believe, doubt, know, think, understand, agree, appear, astonish, these are the verbs which are related to your mental processes. So they're not considered as action verbs, rather than they're considered as state verbs of mental states. Last category of state verbs is state verbs of measure and cost. As the name of the verbs indicate that these verbs are related to measurement and cost of something, right? If you see the sentence, for example, this shirt